Hey everybody, I am a magistrate of the Moscow Academy of Physical Education and the Russian University of Sport. I've got the director of non-anthropogenesis at my house. It seemed like those. Today, we will talk about such general topics of child physical development, and we would like to address a few questions. If you're a computer expert in this field, you know a lot of things. So I have a few questions for you that I'd like to hear. The answers are both our listeners, and the first question we would like to consider with you. What is at the heart of physical development? Physical development is based on physical activity and communication with environmental factors. Evolutional. They kind of have another metabolism because there's no connection to climate. There's no need for strategic planning that you're the same temperature all year round. No, he told me the season, no cold. Where does this one day feed the year? So it turns out we're kind of talking about some kind of lifestyle, mental stuff, and it's based on the relationship. And that's the basis of mom's relationship with the baby. It's a very important moment, so when we go up to 3 or 5 years, the genetic program of the baby is developed. Then we need a model of action. A common primate child has this. He's got to see some kind of activity. He's got to like it. It's a very complex social phenomenon because now a child can't see the patterns of male activity. So from endless light years of space to microworld, there's no macro and micro. Did this have any effect on a person? Did he become physically healthier? I got nervous. I didn't. By the size, by the weight, by the mass of the brain. We've lost, but I'm good with you being physically advanced. If you take someone, they're very much a wrestler of our own. But there's something international will take away that tenth of the Olympic, how much technology it's spent getting them to remove whiskey. Champions, training, and so on. And let's take, for example, our smaller brothers, he said. The one I called doesn't go because it's enough. The experience of life is calm, gorilla. The normal average for his body, with height and weight, is slightly larger than his knees. She's physically 10 times stronger. I mean, it's from these Olympic champions. If they want to fight her, she's all 5 or 10 of them. She'll just kill you. Doesn't go fitness, the gym, doesn't swing, you know. Yeah, there's no medical control, there's no huge amount of drugs that sports have. So what's this? Depends on age, on geography, but that's the truth. The issue of the rule is much less studied than that of pathology or sport. I hope we can talk. And what's the difference between a physical culture business and a sport business? And as for the big sport, it's a much better study of a person than a normal person. The host. Copy that answer. Searching for transversal activity is also, and it's the foundation of a child's development. The basis for its development is search activity. He's settled, and he starts in a few weeks, and he's starting to get to know the world. It's certainly instincts. He's got grabbing, sucking, different reflexes, he's got them. He's got a period and a way to form him. And at the heart of this development is physical activity. Subject activity and search activity, if disabled. The baby. He won't be able to live. He's gonna die if he's disabled and deprived of his sensory reward, which is to create his fate. You know, there's a very tough experience in the late 30s, a kid. When he was born, he was provided with warm food, not his mother, but he did not see the people.
Мгм.
I think I may be wrong, but the longest I've lived is one for 2 months, and the rest of us are dead.
Мгм.
I mean, how important? And here's the communication from the environmental factors and the conditions there very much. It's a big topic. Well, the action is very popular, so we need an unconditional environment for the child's development. I mean, he has to be there. It's forced to develop if it doesn't have to develop.
He took this one with the fucking males.
Да, я вас понял.
Yeah, I get it, but look what kind of activity is the best place for a man's grief.
Какой ребенок? Ну, давайте возьмем
Let's take the most popular age.
возраст, ну, условно говоря, в школе.
I've been a schoolboy for 7 years. And here's the primary school first. Yeah, well, we're very, very, very far up.
Да, проскочили очень далеко.
Because literally from the moment of birth to the time of the birth of agony, it's like before conception. Because the baby's health depends on the health of dad and mom. This is the sum of the factors, and this is the area here, like the health of the child. I'm just gonna give you an example of how important this is to take a few of these episodes, wondering how important this is. Well, for example, a child is on his back or abdomen 2 or 3 months apart.
Мгм.
Breastfeeding, natural feeding is a lifelong development difference.
Мгм.
That is, the first weeks and months are being set up, and the future is being set in motion. This protocol, his health, is a very important factor. Here's another younger man who knows that. We will go further, for example, at the birth of a child if we violate his or her environment.
Мгм.
He's gonna have an inferior metabolism. Well, for example, if the child is in the wrong environment, the displacement of at least two amino acids, and this glutamine and the duari will lead to what we get on the way out. Absolutely two different people with different metabolism. What's the difference? We take glutamine this. It's necessary at the birth of a child to form a nervous relationship, the descent that fills, and the jorin turns on when the liver's in pain. So until the churn's on, until the baby's liver's on, it's getting warmed up by mom, she's got to keep her hands on. It provides it with heat, but in order to keep it warm, the liver works in a certain mode, doesn't produce a fraction. And glutamine is produced in his own brain, but with natural feeding with his mother's milk. He gets a peak of glutamine and a peak through milk, which is what forms this unique chemical broth, which gives a qualitative leap of development of the brain if it doesn't. It's artificial in there or for different reasons, he'll have priority. Here's glutamine, they're out of time. What's the difference? Glutamine is needed to form a nervous relationship, and the adult is then the thought process itself is a self-sufficient process. And the result of this process is not interested in thorin, because it's heat and energy for this lounge. And the learner of Cairns is our specialist. The result is important, so maybe it spends the most valuable energy on heat. He needs people, well, people who live in hunger, they're like a speech. And from here on out, it's mental to finish everything. There's got to be a result of working for the collective, that's the psych type of ours. He's careless. With this metabolism, the people living there in the climate are warm. They kind of have another metabolism, because there's no connection to climate. There's no need for strategic planning that you're the same temperature all year round. No, he told me the season, no cold, where does this one day feed the year? So it turns out we're kind of talking about some kind of lifestyle, mental stuff, and it's based on the relationship. And that's the basis of mom's relationship with the baby. It's a very important moment, so when we go up to 3 or 5 years, the genetic program of the baby is developed. Then we need a model of action. A common primate child has this. He's got to see some kind of activity. He's got to like it. It's a very complex social phenomenon because now a child can't see the patterns of male activity. 200 years ago, a 4-year-old child was fully integrated into the household. Father is already starting to involve himself in something where there will be no initiation. Today, a 16-year-old child is a 16-year-old compared to a 16-year-old summer period, and I think he's a couple. While a teenager at the age of 16, he could already have been the difference just in front of us. In the immediate historical perspective, we saw a huge integration. The mechanism is, like, what's its specialty? Very adaptive adaptation syndrome. It makes it look like adaptation can live by adaptation, but we've got development at the expense of this very metabolic type, which from this adaptive environment is constantly trying to work. If it does not leave, this extreme adaptation leads to degeneration, and degenerative mechanisms begin. But in the social environment, it's clear that one of the major dysplasia syndromes is connective tissue, muscle. The experts know CHEM. It's an extreme form. Degeneration results in a degeneration and the loss of natural selection. With the loss of natural unconditional formations at the expense of the external environment. We are moving from the species level to the category of adaptation and degeneration. Degenerate when the number of human beings on the planet has reached 8 billion. But of these 8 billion in the environment in which we became human beings, in fact, no one would survive. That's where we have to make modern things right now. Environment for child development. It's kind of built a little wrong right now. Synagogue is a benevolent regime, and sometimes it's time to stop helping. If you want your child to be healthy, you have to create an environment around it, certainly development. How do you compensate? Yeah, I want to remind you, in order not to complicate perceptions, I would like to remind you that, as man has evolved at all, what kind of physical activity? Physical activity is the search for heat, food and safety. Hunting, which is a form of hunting, this war. Reproduction is a form of sexual practice. And here's the sexual practice, hunting, labor, war, that's what happened. And as you can see, they were certain, that is, the choice of a man to fight and fight there you love, don't you? Whatever it was very primitive at the moment. If we look at sports, we have to see what looks like them. And we're figuring out what those primitive kids are like. And it turns out she's mostly, yes, it's some kind of military, it's a run, it's a swim, it's a throw, it's a show-off, it's a competition speed. This battle is an affair with Miss Charlie's spitballs. It doesn't matter who wins, because the stress was so important. Stress doesn't mean you died of fear. The press is preparing the body for what? Unknown. So you're right, you have to jump from zone to zone. Your brain calculates the trajectory, considering your physical strength, how it could grow and so on. And he speaks in principle. Well, untrustworthy. Or you can see at once that's impossible and you don't jump, but that's what's close. Well, maybe it won't work. It's coming out of this adrenaline sort of stream. If you don't, and if you are being chased, or if you follow, then it is as if the adrenaline stream were different, large, diverse. What's it for? If that's the case, then he's not the only one there. This group we're talking about groups to prepare your body for this activity. To expand the pupil, to increase the sweating, to increase the temperature, and you develop to toss the muscles, the energy, and so on. There's a flood, and now you're jumping. Two options: either you fell off and died, which is where your failed experience isn't passed on by inheritance, or you jumped over there without food and they're fertilized and spread. I mean, everything was very stupid and primitive. So, the hormonal flow of adrenaline has evolved, and he's going through the bloodstream. And he's like his metabolites breaking through the liver, and he's got to dispose of the board oven. This is where we remember the duary that was involved. And how do you help your liver help your liver? There are several ways. The first is physical activity, i.e. catch up, run away from it, that's what it is. The second one is to catch up and run away, and alcohol, tobacco, has changed. Drugs, pharmacology are also adaptives. Monitoring replaces the liver load of the poplar. Level 3 is above level. It's an endorphins group of hormones that encourage correct action. I mean, the perfect shape the expert has to keep in his head. In any training process, both developing and developing technologies, the child needs physical development. Create the maximum voltage that he can overcome with a positive result, winning. It's a secret and the foundation of education and upbringing. If you work on a lower threshold, you won't have the maximum result. If you take the threshold up and down before you, it's not like you're a teacher. All the subtleties, drama, physical culture and pedagogy and education are these limits of maximum development that can be overcome. A cycle must be understood at the border. Bring it to me. To teach the child to win. I mean, dad's function, what it is to teach you how to do without yourself. And now that's how it works, but mom, in particular, is so designed that she's always downgrading this hospital. I don't want the baby. If dad's in there, don't let God let her get in there, too. Yeah, that's why it has to be a common culture. When we talk about physical culture, we reduce it to physical expression, but here I am, the term he was talking to students. The rock, which means physical culture, can't be seen by feds, balls, gymnastics, swimming, throwing. I say physical culture consists of two words of this physical there, in physics, in science, in general, people and culture. Culture is something that needs to be passed on to others. So you have to pass on the knowledge and the ability to use this world to others. You're the most complicated, the most complex subject is the method, the subject matter, the pathology is like this. It's all about throwing the ball in the basket, push-ups, pull-ups, and a set of stereotypes that have nothing to do with me. This is where I prepared the most optimal activity. It's rare in prison to do this kind of game activity, where the workload is high maximum, but high that a child can overcome us and get lunch. But we're not talking about sports. We're telling you I don't like talking at all. To me, sport is an area of narrow specialization, just like I'm not telling you about the sick. That would never be the case, a struggle we can talk about by telling the sick. To me, athletes, they're in this category. And that should be an individual approach, a very generous one. And there it is, science is different at all. Here we are talking about physical culture. If adolescent parents want their children to be healthy, there is no need to completely avoid any sports section or sport at all from spending time on general physical training. Qualified to include an arsenal of activities of a certain kind, which it implies. We have an innovative educational platform, and we're developing it. General physical culture. What are we putting in there? I mean swim, I mean crawl, it's lasagna, it's kind of silent, but I usually set an example at the pool. I mean, a child of birth can swim at birth. But the ones that everyone calls and the moms that we have, it's about what's in the category of crantics. And that's perfectly natural. Kids, here we are. I'm setting an example for swimming. You know, we had a baby, and before school, he's in a frog with his mom. It must be a task for him to be with his mother and to keep him on the water and not be afraid of the water. Cause it's stabbing, it's physical load, it's handing over this uranium, everything that's with it, and there he is, splashing, playing, and not throwing the ball. He's gonna take it down like that, and the cubes are picking up there. Moms are happy because they're swimsuits. When he comes to school, elementary school, he needs to be taught to stay on the water. It's the same kind of game going on, because the game is a very underrated child's activity. And he's got to have any activity during this period that's game preparation. Or life. It can be arranged, it can be technically difficult. No, the Olympic champions are needed, no, and the hygiene, and this is some arsenal of these devils. Yeah, if he can just stay on the water until school, he's not afraid of the water, and there's no way to move. It's shorter, I'm fine. When he comes to school, he has to take his time. Here you are, if you put the baby in the pool now, they're gonna make it out of it. The athlete's answer, cause coach needs the result of either of these things, it's gonna be very expensive, and then he's not interested, but no one cares if he's just swimming. But the education system needs to do what it needs to do before the 8th grade. There's a hormonal period, another night. Yeah, he's got no time to lay down all the basic navigation techniques. What is a navigation technique? Swimming technique is a very subtle body control in flight. Are you a wise man? Or where it depends if he understands how important a position is in his hands and so on. And there's no rush out of it. It's very important because if we made a mistake, he's in the training process just to multiply it. But when he hit puberty, a very important period began. He should already have the technique perfected. And that's when we start training the force, hardcore. When they start to measure with letters, let them go fast and drive their muscles. Now the question is, do we have a baby? 3 times a week are in this aquatic environment for an hour and a half. The muscle frame will form mine. You need some ray of masters right there to know that the minimum coach is enough for them to do that. There's not gonna be 320 or 220 volts that's connected to their world. The result of what you want. It's a different culture. Here we are. What does it take to do that? That's basic. That's what we say running. Even though it's so obvious to people who know how to run a guy. Hundreds on the ground. That's where we're surrounded by one of them. I've learned a few things in the pub. I walk down the street, I see people who can't run, can walk, can't sit, can't get up, so they don't know how to do basic things. Run different, preferably. It's basically running, but there's this cross-sectional system here. I mean, running across the terrain with a change of rhythm, and so on. That's how rugby is. The kid's gymnastics must be a sportsman.
Ну, не спортивный, обычно.
Usually, the normal gymnastics is just from underground wealth, and that's where the parkours and the barcakes come in. With objects, it's Lakama, it's different. The kid from gymnastics has a lot to do with wires, gymnastics, acrobatics for girls, art gymnastics. Choreography all over the place now. The listener thinks we're some fantasy girl. What should be normal for any human being? It's my sport that's not considered at all. The model must be able to fight. Wow, what a fight, but most of us are allowed. As usual, if you have a ops kid, he has a kid before elementary school, and he had a primary school, it's got to be a photic. And we can see that you are. It turns out, with all this diversity, he's been selling a lot of things in common, because then he has to fight. Learn to fight classically, with his hands, like then he adds that free struggle. And where we have swimming pools, there's a tech on the way. That's Sambo, Judo, and it's a little bit smaller than her house, and it's not fanatical here. And there's more technical creativity and so on and so forth. Rock climbing, it's like fishing. Let's be patient, I have one kid. At some point, he was in the youngest group to jump, which means he's a 6-year-old kid going into the water with him. Coach is a master of sports. Well, before they jumped into the water, it was gymnastics, acrobatics, trampoline, swimming. So we have an object, we have this kind of big thing. And the prom was a demonstration, and there was a lesson here, like you know, coming. I'd seen them, and I think they're giving them a manometer. And then he just blushed into the water. I'll be happy at all because I do. Overseeing any parent from the outside, they looked up to something higher and higher. I know it's 3 meters for a kid to jump from a height. If I hadn't seen him on the trampoline flying under the ceiling, I'd be scared. Now they're going up some crazy height for me, so I think, okay, right now, as a soldier, they're gonna throw a bomb at me. No matter how good they are, they don't do shit. It's a fold, and it's all bolder and bolder and bolder. I get it. I'm a specialist. I'm just a shorter father. I'm hungry. I'm worried. And as specialists understand, this is the other huge level of control, rock climbing, acrobatics. This is all kind of so much game stuff here because there's a command relationship between this one. And this must be restoring the physical culture of the school. There's one where the teacher is now so scared because of the fur for minutes that he was. After all, they might as well have someone like you. 15 times I'm ready to start every 2 years, 3 years, 15 times I've told you what I'm doing. That's because God doesn't let that happen and put parents in prison. These are the ones who want their baby to be healthy. Physical culture has to be like this in this range. Of course, material and tactical resources are required. That's what we're providing for educational ammo. Cause, look, we got a kid who's got gym, he's sweating, and there's a kid sitting there, smells. Then she had math, and then her mom once decided in her head that her son should be a hockey player, or a football player, or a cello. Or a painter. On what principle did she determine that? It's got to go in the depths of her there, her subconscious, her youth, and look for this hockey player. And the kid spends his whole life doing this activity. But even if she decided to buy him clothes, it would give him 100 rubles for someone. I'm gonna get in the car, take him to the gym. When in the field after 2 or 3 hours, there's a flap on the club and it's all closed. So an innovative educational platform is an environment where these are all possibilities. They're built. Is he staying there at school all day? You don't have to drive him around the school. He gets all this pressure, year full-time school. There's an evening coming home, eating this without being fanatical, and there's no sports. Maybe a bet. It has to be already as the highest point of the result.
Мгм.
But there's a moment here. It's about digital technology, about changing the world. What are their characteristics? Well, now you're seeing all the spicy. They're showing these dogs that they're making, the berries. These are the last robots that dance there, and I remember when they used to walk around with money like that. That's just for a few years. The Pentagon buyer has the task of, like this drum. He was able to travel on an autonomous basis for 300 and 500 kilometers under the crossing, carrying 300 and 500 kilograms. Paralympic species show better qualitative results than the Olympic species. I've been watching a story where I'm running on the scrubs.
Мгм.
All this tragedy made me feel human only when I lost my leg. A cup that doesn't value its health. We need to lose our legs and understand what it's like to walk or run. Now you're watching. Why am I bringing this object here? At some point, we will soon have two directions, either transhumanism and the introduction of technology into the human body, or robots of androids at a level where sport is losing because, to date, Paralympic species, if technically released, will not show results. Sex and skeletons, so that's the first and the second. Like a sick child who learned to eat a spoon on his own. Is this in terms of the effort he spent? He's a master of international sports. All fitness is industry. The science-based proposal to transfer everything related to the child's physical health to the education system and leave it there for scientific, not scientific, control. We're probably gonna have you all under medical control.
Да-да.
Yeah, I mean, for centuries now, it's been controlling about 80 indicators of a child's health, incredibly. Nowhere in the world is there a dynamic. His activities are unique, not shuttles. There's already dirt on the hardware. That's why we're going back. I'm sorry I did this because it's impossible. Some conclusion will be unclear to Gay Daddy before we build such schools there. In what activity to give the child the maximum playable, the maximum universal, the minimum, the specialized.
Да, понял.
Yeah, there's no specialty in game forms. Yeah, a specialty for insects. Alexis, we have now addressed our main questions about this topic and even more modern. It's a training theme. Very often, parents, mostly mothers, our moms, our loved ones, and so on, give their children to yoga because they either do it themselves or it's a trend, or they think it might be more positive than normal sports. I mean, basically, let's keep this trend going, so at least on the subject, we should ask if we should give the baby up. The tree was seen as a child at different ages. I must have scared all yours. It was just the two of us. Favorite mothers. Well, whoever's watching, it's him. Yoga is the national heritage of India. It's written down. Only certified teachers, certified there, and not those who have come as we do, are eligible to teach. A bum living out there is smart. It was printed on a colored printer that he had them there. Then put everything in his office and put it on their coast. A qualified trainer or teacher with a physical education must perform the second activity, especially with children. What you're doing all the other things, but it's all like evil. Now the food I'm doing, the whole thing of the year that it looks like. They were all people and institutions. If he wants to impress them, he's gonna have to pick them up. There are friends there, and then there's gonna be a stand. It will, but the butter is this thick, the face is red. What Boris said was no power circulation there, and other neutrinos should make an impression, because no one would pay for walking. He's gonna breathe a lot. That's why it's a selection. Well, the girls who died were taken away, gymnastics planted, text checked. All it looks like has nothing to do with Greek culture. I mean, it's very simple. If you want to give your child to someone, you will find that this person is a specialist and you will be very disappointed. 'Cause even in Moscow we're like shit at a bath, as my grandmother told all specialists to find a yoga specialist, especially in some part of her room. How do we find any yoga expert? A specialist is a level, a good FC specialist, and a minimum. We've been trying to certify these yogas for all of us, give him the opportunity in the advanced training department for the time being, so they can get their diplomas. Well, a lot of people are stupid, 'cause they're still thinking. Yes, I have to fill in. Yeah, 'cause you're talking about yoga. Apparently, the hatha motor making the Compton control bar is a long time ago. But I've been yoga people all along. And yoga fashion, you said it was fashionable to demand censors. I mean, for a sixth year, it's a little more than a 10th wave. The man who started there with me went on to understand. I mean, not with me. In fact, when I spent it, I knew it would have been accepted. You eat a lot of eggs and something lives on other planets. The new wave is the people who reprinted the outfits with these books where it's all classic, but we have all the Soviet gymnastics. Excuse me, let's talk about yoga and have one episode. Let's give the Les Staffed Institute 56th year. Siggy's yoga crooked. We were friends and examined by Sani. It's like the ducks are on the road right now. So what was the experience? Sound irritant, Pavlov reflexes clear. But in a certain period, once, in a certain period, a replacement, like an ordinary man, and he's leading these irritators. So for the first time, the call and the flash, all the reactions are maximum, then they're quiet again in a minute. Then they're quiet in 10 minutes, it's like a reaction, and you're weakening. And when it weakens to the background of some in a minute, there must be no signal, no sound, no gardens. And the response to the absence of this signal is stronger than the first reaction to his experience, so simple. But it speaks very much about the type of our reaction to external irritants. The expected but not the past irritant to the left is stronger than we expect. How did the yoga react? There were a few of them. The Indus gave them what a steam train was like. The bell's ringing when it's run out of reaction. How to find out how the cardiogram was insolent and how interesting it was. Everyone was waiting for what would happen when there was no signal and nothing happened. Here's my experience. Maybe it's an anecdote. Maybe it's just the teachers. No, they told me that. I didn't see it documentarily. Maybe it didn't happen, but that's what yoga is to me.
Да, я понял.
Yeah, I remember in this class, people like this, I haven't seen or met.
Ну, единица.
Не видел, не встречал. Когда-то
We once created the first one in Moscow.
Академию йоги.
Мгм.
Привозили из Индии
They brought
специалистов.
specialists from the India.
Очень это какая-то
It's
вот
like a way back in,
типа
like 7, 8, like it sounds like the
назад,
truth.
короче, где-то там, 90-е годы. Это было в центре Москвы.
It's been in the middle of Moscow for the 1990s and it's been filmed. The studio worked 24 hours a day for the most expensive. The most expensive time was from 4 to 6 in the morning. I mean, come out by 4 because yoga is a lot of yoga in the yoga. We've been looking for some, they're mostly illiterate.
Ну, каких-то красивых.
Образ.
Они в основном неграмотные все. Английский язык.
English, but it's a separate story. Indus are a separate story. But they're mostly people who haven't even spoken English. And we're when an interpreter is, like a traditional English girl, we have an interpreter. She says you like vegetables and English don't talk. I spoke to some of him, some of my own. This beef here says I'm okay. He's gonna hear it. Let him talk and I'll tell you what to say. Well, students. That's what happened. You need what was fashionable like a hair. I'm sorry it happened. Well, that's how it was. So when mom's doing yoga herself, she wants to give the baby up there. Mom, that's a shame. She's coming out. Maybe he'll meet with happiness. Maybe she likes these absolute categories ready to rope. Doesn't have a Jimmy if she wants to give her baby up for yoga. But she is to understand when she comes back these static positions that require deeper breath control with allusion to activity. He needs to move as fast as he can, so he can do it later when he's there. It's if he sees mom doing yoga. It's either daddy doing yoga or lying there doing yoga. One day he's gonna have it and he's gonna have to come up, he's gonna be 60 or 7. Sleep's gonna do yoga and take care of her health. 'Cause I'm the one who used to know my wife. I study then I sleep. So it's 4 to 6. I wouldn't say it would open him up. A certain connection from a guest, yes, but at some point. Here I am, and my wife wakes up in the morning, comes out and sees me doing something there. Well, let's just say she got scared and said it loudly. Just like, what are you doing? It's kind of like blowing up some kind of family, too.
Yoga's in India.
It is believed that anyone will be taken from birth or from childhood, but it has to be borne in mind that yoga isn't all about yoga. It's like all the Russians playing ballads with bears.
Ну, да.
I mean, it's very dull, it's so small. If the child is there to do so, some of them are prepared. It's mostly a Frenchman, but more than him, so people get confused. Then they took it, said standing on the head wasn't yoga.
Да, я понял, чё.
So let people who know about it or kittens talk seriously about it, and very few people talk about it. It's all at the level of fashion and beauty. The rugs are colored right here, I mean, the clothes. There's this business around here that smells good.
Я просто...
I was just meeting with suggestions like a kid's old man.
Детский садик ищет тренировку.
He's looking for yoga training, and there's no way he can't even imagine if he's ever been able to take a yoga coach. If it's not a teacher or a kid's coach, it's a kid's training class.
Ну да.
Yes, it would be much easier to deal with children, because walking, running, and doing basic exercise is a huge problem.
Да, я понял.
Got it. So give these children to general physical training. You know, can I give you some advice to say, let's say, respectable parents, there's gonna be, like, a lot of walking. I grew up when communications were for me when you and your dad went there for a long time. The easier it is, the better the committee is talking. You walk around, you talk, and I think you do. It's understandable that there is no time, but there are no miracles. If you do not have time, the child will receive a concentrated defect if you want to place it in a concentrated activity. Yeah, that's a problem, of course. With an epilogue, thank you, elite sandwiches, for a few of you to listen to. We're done here on the air with you. Thank you for checking out the whole thing.